Hi, and welcome to Quilt Street. I'm Mary Kate Karr-Petras.
And I'm Rhonda Lother.
And today we are talking about threads and batting, two very important things that every quilter needs.
Absolutely. When it comes to thread, there are just an infinite variety of colors available. And it can be daunting. When you first buy a fabric bundle, you may think, I need to have the color thread for each little piece of fabric I have.
Right.
And that's not the case at all.
No, it's not. And there's also a wide variety of sizes and types of threads. So for today, we're just talking about the thread that we recommend you use for piecing, right?
On your sewing machine.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. And really all you need are some basic neutrals to get started. White works well, gold as we have here, and grays can go with almost anything, truly.
They really do. I mean, I remember when I started out, I did too. I tried to match thread like I was garment sewing. I tried to match my thread to my fabrics, but then when you're joining two very different colors, which thread do you choose? It was a quandary until finally somebody said, just use gray. And it was like the heavens opened and the angels sang. It just made my life so much easier. And in fact, I don't leave a quilt store anymore without at least one spool of gray thread.
That's an excellent point. And I've used gold an awful lot. I find that with reproduction fabrics in particular, gold blends really well with a lot of those colors.
I have not used gold. I'm going to have to add that to my repertoire.
It's great. I know, and maybe a black or a navy blue to go with it. But really, any of these would be great starter colors to use in your collection. So what thread weight do you think quilters use most often? What should they look for?
I would say a 50 weight, 40 weight, either of those are going to work well. And with a little caveat, it depends on your machine, right? So if one of those weights is not working so well, try the other one. Maybe your machine will like it better.
Can you show us the difference? I think we have
Sure.
an example of a 40 weight and a 50 weight thread. And it will say on the label, or if you're shopping online, it will say in the description what weight the thread is. And a good rule of thumb to keep in mind is that the higher the number, the thinner the thread is going to be.
It seems a little counterintuitive, but once you get used to it, it makes sense. So this white, we laid it out here on my gray sleeve. For contrast, this white is the 40 weight and the gold is the 50 weight.
Correct.
And up close, I can actually see quite a difference. I mean, you are a quilt nerd or a sewing nerd when you can pick up a spool of thread and you're like, oh, I can tell. And I have gotten to that point in the past. I'm just trying to spread that out a little bit so it lays more nicely.
Yeah, you can definitely tell that gold thread is thinner.
Yeah, and so it depends. So keep in mind, though, that the thread is going to take up a little bit of space in your seam allowance.
That's a good point.
So depending on your fabrics, you may want to go a little bit of a thinner thread so that it takes up a little bit less. And so again, in this instance, the 50 weight would be the thinner thread.
That seems to be the more popular option right now, I think, in the quilting world, is to use the 50 weight thread. Although 40 is still fine if you want to use that.
Absolutely. You're not going to go wrong. 30 weight might be getting a little bit thicker. It'll still work, but it's going to be a little bit thicker.
It might be a little more difficult on your machine.
Exactly.
Might have some breakage issues.
Yeah, especially for piecing.
True.
So.
Absolutely.
And cotton thread, as you said, you want to just look for a nice cotton thread. And again, if one is not working, if you find one manufacturer thread that's not working so well in your machine, try a different one. It really can make a difference, especially if you're working on an older machine.
True. All right.
So,
well, let's talk about batting. Batting or wadding, as you may sometimes hear it called, comes in different thicknesses. And that's, again, a matter of personal preference. I have 4 samples here. These are all pretty much the same thickness. They're very, very similar. And the thickness is also called the loft.
yes.
You'll look for a high loft, means it's thick and puffy, and a low loft is going to mean it's thinner. And I'll just show a few examples here. And these are all battings I have used myself in my personal quilts. This top one is an example of cotton, 100% cotton. You can see it's a traditional choice. That's what quilters of yore have used for a long, long time. Very thin. It's breathable. It's a great option for warm climates where you're not necessarily needing a quilt for warmth all the time. It's a great thin layer to have. And if you're like me and you like to get that pucker, you want that old crinkly feel of a quilt, then cotton's a great choice because if you once you wash your quilt, if you have 100% cotton fabric and 100% cotton batting, it's going to draw up just enough where you get that nice crinkly soft look, kind of like in this star quilt behind us. Very similar, same situation. So that's cotton. And you'll also find cotton polyester blends. 80-20 you hear a lot about. That's a great option. It has just a little bit of polyester.
So it's 80% cotton,
correct.
20% polyester blend.
Right.
Right. And it's so I guess the idea is that that little bit of polyester just helps keep it a little bit smoother, right?
Yes, and I believe you were saying it's helpful for quilt shows. If you're going to have your quilt in a show.
Heard that. Not that I enter quilts into shows, but I have heard that people who enter quilts into shows like that little bit of polyester because it just helps it lay flatter because those quilts are on display. They're not laying on a bed.
True. Very good point. All right. Our second example is wool batting. And I had never used this until the past year because, again, I've lived in the deep south my entire life. It's very warm most of the year. And so I thought, well, wool's going to be too hot for me. And that was not the case at all. I mean, it's really breathable. It's a natural fiber, just like cotton. So it has that breathability. And I found that wool also is great for preventing those harsh creases.
Okay.
If you put a quilt folded up at the foot of your bed or on a shelf, when you pull it out, it's not going to have those deep, deep creases as much as cotton. It has a great light feel to it, and it is breathable.
I have not used wool. It's on my list.
It's an excellent choice. I was surprised how much I liked wool. Really? I did not think I would ever use wool, but I do. I like it a lot.
Oh, it's soft.
It's very soft. Nice. And this is another one I've only used recently. It's bamboo. It feels a lot like cotton. It has that soft feel to it. It even kind of looks like cotton, has the same little pinpricks in it like cotton. But it's not 100% bamboo, correct?
Right. It usually comes in a blend, usually a cotton blend, because the bamboo fibers are produced similar to how rayon is produced, where it's a natural fiber, but it's sort of extruded. That's a technical term, but to create the threads. But it doesn't usually come in a 100% bamboo batting.
Right. But again, this is just so soft. The first quilt I had quilted with this, it just felt dreamy. It just felt so soft. So I really became a bamboo fan as well.
I've used it. I can't remember what quilt I used it in, but I know I've used it before, and it has held up quite nicely.
Very cozy. And our final example is polyester. Again, if you want a really thick quilt that feels almost like a comforter, you actually can get polyester in a very high loft. They'll make it puffy like that. And have you used polyester in your quilts?
I have. I have actually. So when I started quilting, I thought quilts were supposed to be puffy like a comforter.
Yes. I've
told this story before. I actually used 2 layers of cotton batting in my first hand quilted quilt.
My goodness.
Because I was like, this is too thin. This isn't how it is. Not knowing that really this is, aside from the fact that it's bonded and the fibers are bonded together, this is pretty close to what vintage quilts, antique quilts were made with, right? They were carding their own batting.
Yes. Had a lumpier feel to it.
Right. But people who want really vintage feeling quilts, antique feeling quilts, they're going to go for the thinner batting because that is more historically accurate, right? I didn't know that. And so I have used polyester batting in a hand quilted quilt as well. And
how did that compare as far as hand quilting?
I didn't love it. It offered no resistance to the needle. And sometimes when you're hand quilting, and we'll get into quilting later, but it just didn't offer the same resistance to the needle, and it just keeping the stitches even was a bit more of a challenge.
Right. The one issue I had with polyester, I used it on my first bed-size quilt, which I also hand quilted, and I had a problem with the fibers coming up through the quilt top. As I pulled my needle through, a few little polyester fibers came up with it, and so it looked like I had little white specks all over my quilt, and I did not love that. That first quilt was white, red, and black. It was a log cabin, and so it was very obvious on the black. And if you try to pick it off, it just pulls more. It pulls more material through there. It pulls more of the batting. So I'm really not a fan of polyester unless I'm making, say, a table runner, placemats. I don't mind it for that. But
Well, it definitely can't be beat as far as durability goes.
That's true.
It's not going anywhere. The other thing to keep in mind, though, is that polyester is not going to shrink in the wash. And so if you use polyester batting in a quilt made with cotton fabrics, the cotton will shrink up a little bit, but the batting is not. So you're not going to get that crinkly, vintagey look. It will lay a little bit flatter. And in fact, once you see a number of quilts, you can kind of tell the ones that were made in the 70s, 60s, 50s, when polyester was kind of the batting of choice.
Yes.
Because no matter how many times those quilts have been washed, they still retain a little bit of a flatter appearance to the surface. So
you might want that for a wall hanging as well, where you don't really want something, lumpy, dimensional. If you want a wall quilt, that polyester may be a great option for you.
Yeah, and it retains a lightness to it.
Yeah, it's very light.
And it comes in a wide range of thicknesses and of lofts. This is, in particular, is a very thin one, but you can find ones that are kind of mushy, So it's all about the look that you're going for, the feel that you're going for, your budget perhaps. They do come in a range of price points. Let's talk about how to buy them though.
Yes, that's a great point. Sometimes when you go into a store, you'll see it on a bolt. And we have an example here.
Excuse me while I exercise my muscles to pull this over into the frame. Yes, so let's get that here. Okay, so this is a wool batting. It looks really puffy, but if we were to unroll it, we would see that it's, the single layer is just as thin as that.
Right.
But this is the bolt that the store gets, right?
Yes. And so the store would have that out maybe on a roll, and they can cut it to the length you need. For example, I have a California King at home. And so oftentimes I do need to go to a place that has a bolt because I'll need an extra long length cut. Usually I'll need 120 inches to work for my quilt. So, but more often than not, you'll buy it in a package, excuse me, that's sold, batting will come in packages of crib size, let's say twin, full, queen, and king. I don't see a lot of California King.
I can't think.
I really can't think of an example, but again, that's usually why I try to go to a store that has the bolt.
And then, so what you want to do is you want to round up based on the size of your finished quilt, and you can trim down those prepackaged battings to the dimensions that work for the pattern that you're working with.
Yes.
That you want to buy up. There are ways to piece battings together if you've got batting scraps, but that'll be another topic.
That's another topic
time.
For another day.
But if you're really into the thrift side of things, you can do that. So.
All right.
But you want to piece like with like.
True. You don't want to piece.
True.
If you're going to piece batting together, you don't want, say, to have.
No, that would be
all these
quite
different
an
kinds
interesting.
together.
That would be a really interesting patchwork quilt. But again, another topic for another time.
Exactly.
Okay, so in our next video, we're going to be talking about how to read a pattern.